For 40 years, we have been lied to about women and men, about domestic violence, about sexual assault, about privilege, about rights, even about the very idea of equality. Erin Pizzey, who founded the world's first internationally recognized battered women's shelter, has known all along that something's wrong, because she witnessed the change herself back in the early 1970s. Today, she talks to many younger men and women who have been hurt by hateful and dishonest gender ideology, and she has a question for them. When did you wake up? And how long have you been awake? And of course, what should we do about it now? Welcome to When Did You Wake Up with Erin Pizzey and her co-host, Dean Esme. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Sunday, 23rd of November, 2014 episode of When Did You Wake Up with Erin Pizzey. I, as usual, am Erin's co-host, Dean Esme. We had some severe technical difficulties yesterday, and so if you were listening to the show and it abruptly ended, please accept our apologies. We're back today. And this show will be saved to our archives and available on YouTube and the usual places you can get it afterwards. So, how you doing today, Erin?
Fine. It's poured with rain all day, and I've been very much looking forward to continuing this program. So I'm in good shape.
Excellent. Well, me too. Just to start out for a moment, I want to mention that this week, much of the world will be informally celebrating something called White Ribbon Day, which is meant to raise awareness of issues of domestic violence, which we applaud. However, we have noticed that some groups using the white ribbon are unfortunately only talking about male perpetrators and female victims and asking men and men alone to stop violence against women and women alone. And we have a little bit of a problem with that, don't we, Erin?
Oh, yes, we do. We do indeed. And anybody who wants to have a look at my new website, which is it's whiteribbon.org, can read what we have to say about it. For me, I find it amazing at this day and age that anybody can be so ill-informed as to think that we women can't be equally violent as men. I remember standing on platforms actually saying to people, I can't be the only woman in this room that's responsible for my own behavior, and being met with a chilly silence. But the fact is, it's so patronizing to treat us as weak and unable to make our own decisions or take responsibility. So I think it's time all that stopped. So by all means.
Yep.
Sorry.
You were violent as a child, right?
Oh, very, yeah. I mean, why not? Both my parents were violent. I learned that, and you can learn different things. My twin sister learned to collapse in a heap and what I used to call hibernate, where I'd come out fighting. Yeah, I tried to murder my father very seriously. And funnily enough, though, he was terrorizing. I was very frightened of him. But it was my mother who was the physically violent one, especially to me. That's why I've never been at all flawed by this strange concept that it's all men.
And most of our regular listeners will know all that, but I wanted to get that in just so that people would hear it and understand it, and what our message has always been, what Erin's message has always been. Domestic violence isn't a gendered issue. So please check out the information at whiteribbon.org. You might also look for a website called Partner Abuse State of Knowledge, which is put together by a large group of academics. And you'll be seeing more about this issue on the front pages of avoiceformen.com this week, because we will be talking about it a lot more. We want to challenge other groups using the white ribbon to do a better job. And because ultimately, who are the victims of most domestic violence? It's the children. Right, Erin?
Absolutely. Absolutely. At least, adults choose each other. We children have no choice.
There you go. Okay, Erin. Well, waiting patiently on the line is our friend Ali Mehraspand. Just for everybody's awareness, if you don't already know, Ali lives in the Tehran area of Iran. He is a researcher, a writer, an engineer, and a men's rights activist. He is the editor of A Voice for Men Farsi, Farsi being the language spoken by most of the people in Iran. Ali has also written a number of devastatingly reality revealing articles about what life is like in the supposedly patriarchal and oppressive country of Iran. Probably the most popular of all time was The Myth of Patriarchal Oppression in Iran, which if you haven't read it yet, you don't know. You may think you know what it says. You don't know. He's also written some amazing things about honor killings and the place of religion in common life there in Iran, and quite a few other things. So there, are you with us today, Ali?
I'm right here, and thank you for the invitation.
Excellent. Well, we're going to more or less pretend yesterday's conversation didn't happen because it got cut so abruptly. So I'm just going to ask you again. When did you wake up and realize something was wrong with the messages we were being fed about men, about women, about feminism, etc.? And
what yesterday conversation? What yesterday conversation?
The one that got interrupted. Yeah, we'll pretend it didn't happen. So when did you wake up, my friend?
Well, I really don't know because I couldn't put my finger on a single moment in my life prior to which I thought in a certain way, and subsequent to which it was not a black and white, moment that I could have an epiphany. So I really don't know. I always knew on some level that something was wrong. I could see some of the things at early ages, as young as, 7. And I could see also some other things wrong when I got to be a teenager because puberty hit me like a truck. And, but I was a white knight.
Purity? Purity, did you say?
Big one. Puberty.
Oh, puberty.
Puberty.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I'm sorry, you were a white knight and a big one.
Oh, yeah. But I think by the time I got to be in the dating world, I really saw the imbalance of power between men and women.
Now, explain what you mean by imbalance of power.
Well, women's worth was much more than that of men. And maybe we can talk about this more in the show as we're going to explore the life in Iran. So I'm going to save the explanation. Yeah.
Okay, can I just say something here? Now, apart from being there as a child and having wonderfully happy memories of being in Tehran, my whole concept of what happens to women in Tehran is obviously made by the press and the people I met who were coming out at the time of the revolution and later on. But it sounds to me as though in the last big revolution and the sudden emergency of a women's movement has changed the entire shape of what we understand to be how society works in Iran. Because my understanding was women were forced to cover up, were horribly oppressed, were beaten in the streets, were stoned, and all this kind of thing. Now, did that at one point happen?
Well, the truth is that life has really changed in Iran in the past.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Did at one time, would it have been fair to say at one time, yes, women were oppressed, particularly religiously?
That's a very good question. And I think that young women needed to rebel against a system that did put limitations on them. But the question is here, were those limitations put upon them by men? And I'm going to just put forth an alternative. That
okay, can you give me a date? Can you give me a date when we can begin to think about women having some kind of powerful interaction? So when did the first beginnings of the women's movement, do you think, hit Iran?
Maybe just as early as it hit anywhere else, but the culture at large was a traditional one.
Yes.
So the majority of women were traditional back then, and there are many traditional women in here right now.
Can you just explain what traditional means, though? Because for the people who are listening, many of them won't have any idea what a traditional household was like in Iran in those days. For instance, you were saying, so you give us an example of you living with your mother and your father and brothers and sisters.
Well, I had a brother and a sister, and
okay. Tell me, would there have been a difference in your sister's life to you and your brother's lives?
Well, I couldn't say there was much difference, except that when we went out, she had to cover her hair.
Okay. And could she go out by herself? Could she go out by herself?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, most women do. Almost all of them.
Mm-hmm.
The notion that they cannot walk out of the house by themselves, it's just ridiculous.
Okay.
And let me tell you something about half-truth.
Okay.
Not only the Western press and the media have given half-truths about the life of men and women, censoring the oppression that men go through, censoring the rights that women have that men don't in a traditional culture. Not just that kind of half-truth. Again, the only kind of truth that was given in the Western press was those selected of young women rebelling against the societal laws. They never told you about those other group of women who wanted those societal laws to be there. And let me tell you something. When it comes to double standards, and by double standards I mean some sorts of behavior that are okay for men to do, but not okay for women to do, I can assure you that more women support such double standards than men do, and there are actually studies on this. And it might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but there are many benefits for women in such cultural dynamic. And if I may start by saying that, for example, we had the regime of Shah, which was very progressive, right? And there were not limitations in the law on women to dress in any way, right?
Yes,
but I'm going to argue that limitations on women back then was so much higher than right now. Why? Because culturally it was unacceptable for women to do many things back then. But now it's pretty acceptable, although the law says otherwise. So, you might say that, for example, the state is run mostly by men. But just considering the thing that I just said, cultural propensities are the driving force. So even if we want to spare the feminists and say yes, okay, let's assume that the state is not the mirror of what people believe it should be. Even if that's not true, you can argue that the cultural propensities did put limitations on women, and it was supported by women.
But can you give me some examples, for instance? Because we're talking generalities, but I just wanted to know some examples.
Well, if I could jump in for a second, if I could just have a quick second, this might help. Ali and I were talking off before show, and he was telling me that, like, for example, when it comes to restrictive garb on women, although it's not as bad now as people think, that it's almost always women's mothers and sisters. It's other women putting heavy pressure on young women to cover up, right?
95% of the time it's women. Now, I could say that adolescent women learn sexual behaviors from their mother mainly. And then there is also the peers. Now, for example, I want to give you some examples. All the time that I have seen somebody criticizing the way a woman has dressed, the way a woman has put on makeup, it has been a woman. I'm going to give you just an example. I have a girlfriend, and she experienced so much suppression of her sexuality that it's just exemplary. I mean, she couldn't even do her hair when she lived with her mother, clean her eyebrows, do anything. It was all wrong. And the only persons that put pressure on her were her mother, her mother's aunts, and her own aunts.
So are you saying that is almost a matriarchal society in Iran of women who make the rules within the family home?
You know, this theory might just be counterintuitive because, well, men hold the political power, and people are going to say, okay, this is what the religion says, and the religion is run by the clergy, and they are the ones telling women to do this. And, well, you're going to have to look who is supporting these laws, and you're going to find that, yes, women do play a role in that, and nothing the religion brought about was new. It was already there in the country of Saudi Arabia. So, yes, I can say that to some extent it actually stinks of a matriarchal society. And you know what? There are two benefits to women if they can suppress other women's sexuality. And this is what I meant by traditional women. What I meant by traditional women are women with traditional values extremely suppressing female sexuality so as to garner two important benefits. One, because, well, they can extract better resources for men. And let me just give you an example. The initiation of sex in the West, in the United States, for a man might cost a dinner and a drink. But in Saudi Arabia, it costs him a house and the promise to pay nafaqah for the rest of his life, even if he divorces the wife.
Explain
and
that.
many explain. Okay. There are three basic laws that you might want to know about Islamic laws.
Yeah, we need.
That
Why not? Can you just explain it so it paints a picture? This is a young man. He is he's in his late teens. He wants to have a sexual relationship with his girlfriend. Now explain what happens from there.
Okay, I'm gonna put it in the context of a traditional culture, right? For example, the one
and then we can move.
Yeah, to a more modern one, because what I'm saying does not describe life in Iran right now, but it's a pretty accurate description of life in Saudi Arabia and what it was like 20 years ago.
In Iran.
So
20 years ago.
The one the time you were referring to, 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about a man in Iran 30 years ago. He's 18. Okay. He wants to have a sexual life. Yeah. First of all, no girlfriend. Forget about it. Right? So he is going to have to go to the university, and the only choice for him that might earn him a sexual encounter is marriage. Mm-hmm. Now, for him to be able to get married, first of all, he's going to have to serve time in the military. And then when he comes out, he's going to have to find a job. And there are many conditions set upon him so that a family accepts him to marry their daughter. And the conditions are that he has to prepare a house, and the price of house in Iran is unbelievably high. And then there is the Mehriye. The negotiation on Mehriye starts. And for those of you who don't know, Mehriye is a law. When a man signs an amount of Mehriye, it basically means that he is that amount of money in debt to his wife, and the wife can ask for it anytime. And the average of Mehriye is actually as much as he's gonna earn his entire life. And the Islamic law says that every penny spent in a marriage is the responsibility of a man. So even if the woman is the richest woman in the country, even if she does work herself, she's not responsible for anything. And she can actually have him jailed if he stops paying the nafaqah. And there are other laws like Mehr and many other laws. So this is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say that this restriction of sex can help women garner better resources from men. And the second benefit that women can earn is that the chances of them losing a man who's providing for them in such manner to another woman is reduced. And I'm just going to give you another example. Right now in Saudi Arabia, and it's a very hot debate, women are not allowed to drive, right?
Yeah.
And the only ones that you're going to hear about are the ones that are rebelling against this societal law, right?
Yes.
But you're never going to hear about those that are supporting this. So some men went into into universities where open-minded women were. And he gave out questionnaires to women to see if they want this law to be there or not. And he found out that the overwhelming majority of women didn't want women to have the right to be able to drive a car. And when he asked for the reason why, they said, because we don't want our husbands to have the chance to use this as a pretext to talk to other female drivers. So you see, restriction of sex can be beneficial to women, and at some point in history, well, men and women decided that this was better for their survival. But right now, there is this younger generation of women, and they can see that they can do an office job, and they do not need to entirely rely on somebody else to provide for them. So they're rebelling against these old restrictions. So I'm just putting the question here. Are these restrictions on women put upon them by men, or put upon them by an older generation of women who were traditional, and the tradition was that, for example, mothers make their daughters learn sexually repressive behaviors?
There are also other benefits, because in that time, if my memory serves me correctly, the mothers in that generation also expected that their daughters-in-law, who would be coming into their families, would then be another form of servitude, because the daughter would serve the mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law would run the relationship. Yeah,
I'm just gonna say that there are many jokes about this. The greatest enemies are daughter-in-law and mother-in-laws in the traditional culture as we experience it back then.
I think that's fairly
universal.
Right now,
of course, things have changed.
Yeah, because now, with the rebellions coming up and the changes that are coming, this is the interesting point, because at some point, the younger women, did become known feminists. I think there's almost a split between the Muslim feminists, who are more traditional feminists, and still use the Quran, and the secular feminists, who are the feminists who are making the biggest changes. Am I right?
There is a difference between them. The difference is that the secular feminists do not have any power in the state,
right.
But
okay.
Islamic feminists do. So the governmental budgets dedicated to women and women's organizations and all the things that are helping women are channeled through Islamic feminists. But but the secular feminists have more popularity among people.
Now, would you say, for instance, give me an example. In 1971, the British radical feminists stood up and said that marriage was a dangerous place for women and children. Is that a thought that has come into the new feminism in Iran? That marriage is now something that is dangerous towards women, and they should be thinking of not being married?
Some concepts of Western feminism have a hard time entering and infiltrating the minds of Iranians. This is one of them, because right now, because of many financial pressures, there is a shortage of young men who want to marry, and there is a surplus of young women who do want to marry. So everybody knows that there are many girls waiting to get married, and this form of longing for marriage, popular among young women, makes everybody doubt that it is dangerous for women, actually.
Well, that's a relief, and it'll come. I mean, this is part of the concept of the patriarchy, that the patriarchy, men oppressing women. I mean, the only way out for women is not to have relationships with men.
Yes, exactly.
But I can see that you've now got a situation where young men are faced with myriad. No wonder they don't want to get married, because they're going to be enslaved for life, aren't they?
So can you explain again what
They
Mehr
are.
is? Can you explain again real quick what Mehr is?
Oh, you were talking to me. I
Yeah.
thought you were speaking with Erin. Sorry.
No.
Yeah. Mehriye is an amount of money which is written into the marriage contract and is agreed upon by the families of the bride and groom, which the husband owes to his wife, and the wife can ask for it anytime she wants, and the husband is mandated to give it to him. Now, one study said the average for Mehriye was around 500 gold coins, and the study was back in 2008, and it seemed very, a moderate number. But the study said that we're going to have huge increase in the amount of Mehriye. So even if we're going to assume that the average amount of Mehriye is 500 gold coins, that's going to be about $200,000. And for Iranians that have low rate of currency exchange, I'm going to tell you that $200,000 in Iran is an equivalent of $1 million in the United States.
No wonder men don't want to get married. Huh.
Oh yeah, but let me tell you something else. Even back then, I remember when I was a child, every guy said that, okay, I'm not gonna accept Mehriye. I'm not. And everybody would mock them and say, you know what? Many better men than you said this, but at the time they hit their 20s, they groveled for any woman to accept them. So you're just gonna accept any amount of Mehriye that your wife is gonna ask. But you know what? Now that the country is not sexually repressed as it used to be, now men have other options, and now men are defying marriage. So it was not an option for men of 20 years ago. It just goes to say what I was trying to say, that sexual repression is a form of matriarchal power, as you just wanted to put it.
And it's understandable. I mean, certainly you could say exactly the same about England in the 50s, particularly, when girls remained virgins until they were engaged to be married, at least. And then suddenly overnight we had the 70s revolution and everything was thrown out. And the situation now is, as far as the feminist movement is concerned, to a certain extent they've won the war. Well, they've won the battle, but they've lost the war, because now men here are certainly not getting married. They've no need to get married. Everything's provided for them. And one of the things that's good... Go ahead.
Interestingly, it's very relevant to what you just said. There were studies of this in England and in the United States back in 1940s and 1950s. After the World War II, there were colleges wherein the number of female students were 10 times the number of men. And there is this concept that if you're in the minority sex, you get to dictate the terms of relationship because you hold the power. Mm. And so there were women who would put out newspaper advertisements that said, want somebody for the prom night and I will pay for the limo and for everything. So guys could dictate the terms of relationship. So once, there are studies that go back then, and it's prior to the sexual revolution of the 70s. And what these studies find out, and they confirm what I was just saying earlier, when women are the minority sex and they get to dictate the terms of relationship, what happens is that sex gets so repressed and women get to repress other women's sexuality, and sex outside marriage is banned. But when men are the minority sex, teen pregnancy actually increases, and it's not just done in the US, it's a cross-cultural thing, the pregnancy rates. It's done even in other countries. When men are the minority sex, pregnancies get a lot, and sex outside marriage gets pervasive. Sex in general gets pervasive.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, because now modern Iranian women can wear their headscarves showing hair, They also, I understand that plastic surgery is almost a must for most young women in your country now. It's a hugely high rate.
Oh, the highest rate of no surgery here, and the plastic surgery, we're among the top 5 countries with plastic surgery right now. And yes, many women do that. They just go for the plastic surgery. And we're the number 2 consumer of the makeup in the world.
Really, number 2. Yeah, so let's go back to the role of men in all this, because we're talking about women, and really the thing that's most interesting is that, and it's eye-opening for me, and I'm sure Dean probably agree. And one of the things that is strange is that I've always thought of men as being in such a powerful position, and I gathered from you this is not true. Explain honor killings to me, because this is how we really think of Iranian society as rife with honor killings and stoning of women and hanging of women. And, well, this is what we hear. This is what we read.
I'll tell you something. This is what also Iranians read, and many of them don't know about the real issues. Well, I'm going to start with the honor killing. Honor killing is a phenomenon which is very rare. But the interesting thing about honor killings is that it's defined in a very certain manner, so that the victim could only be female. The way it's defined is that, well, honor is, it's a concept that we call ghairat, and there is no equivalent for it in English, so I cannot use an English word here. And it's basically a mirror of that sexual restriction I was talking about. So when 2 people get to have a relationship outside marriage, sometimes, and this is very rare, so it's not representative of all the culture, sometimes this happens, honor killing, and one of them gets killed. Now here's the interesting part. If the girl gets killed, she gets killed by her own family. But if the guy gets killed, he gets killed by the girl's family again.
Do you have any figures for how many women, how many men in honor killings?
There is no figure for how many men. There's no
discussion.
For women,
But it happens.
Yeah, and no
but it
discussion.
happens. But you're saying it happens.
And it happens, I can tell you, at higher rates. But the figure for women in Iran is around 100 per year annually. It's around that, 100 to 100.
That's a lot of deaths. It's a lot of deaths.
Oh yeah, it's 100 honor killings of women in Iran, and it mostly happens in 2 or 3 very traditional provinces and in the rural areas.
Is it punished?
Oh, of course. But
it is punished. It's illegal.
It is punished. Yeah, it's illegal. Yeah.
Let me make a couple quick points. I noticed that that Iran has a population of almost 78 million, and so while 100 is 100 too many, and we don't know how many men are, that really isn't very common. And then what you're saying is it's only found in certain areas, and those who do it are typically punished.
Oh yeah.
Right. Please go on.
Right, but I'm just going to point you to something else. There is this Iranian woman who has done extensive research on honor killings, and she has traveled to all the areas that this has happened, and she has interviewed the families. What she has to say is very interesting, and I think she's a feminist, by the way. She says that when I interviewed all these families, what I found was that women in these families not only supported this, and not only defended this, but in many cases were the ones behind the decision.
Is there
I don't know if you heard it.
Wait a minute. So you're saying the women were the ones behind the decision? Like they told the man, you need to go kill her?
Oh yeah. Of course you don't know who has told who, but it seems that the whole family has decided it. And women are very supporting of it. And it's very interesting to point out.
Is there any availability of her research? I mean, could you put that up on a website so we could?
She's trying to publish her book, but she's not allowed to publish it yet. We don't know if she's gonna get the license.
Okay.
So we could say from something like that if this is true, once again, we're seeing even in horrible extremes like killings, honor killings, women are part of the problem and not just the victims. Part
Yes,
of. I'm
and
not
people who
saying the
do
men
it
are
are
innocent.
psychopaths.
I'm not saying the men are innocent.
Of course they're not. Of course they're not. But what we're saying here is that women do take part in all the taboos in a culture, and those who do it are psychopaths. They are not just normal people. But you know, those sexual restrictions that I was talking about are implemented in basically two ways. Peers, and that would be your friends who are judgmental about you. And I'm going to point you to one study that says, and it's prior to 1970s in the US, and in some other cultures it's reiterated. And they were asking people if they think it is a woman who has sex outside marriage is an immoral person. And they found out that the ones with harsher judgment are women. More women think that those women are immoral than men do. And one of the ways that these sexual restrictions are implemented are through the mother of a person. And that mother also has peer pressure from her own sisters and her sisters-in-law and her mother-in-law. So it's a very complicated matter how sexual restrictions manifest themselves in a phenomenon like honor killings, in which, of course, men are censored totally. And, well, how women's role are in this is defining this.
Okay, that gives us a much more balanced answer to the question of honor killings. But I'm quite interested, and maybe we could now discuss, so how much has male role in the family changed? Here we are in the 21st century. I mean, I knew it from the last century, but would you say now that male role in society in Iran is being eroded and men are being sidelined, or would you say that it is now far more equal between men and women and quite a healthy thing?
I can say it's healthy, and I can say with diminishing women's restrictions, that some restrictions on men have loosened, especially with the rise of Islamic feminism. Now, what these people did was they even enforced more the traditional roles on men. We did have a law that was Ujratul Misl, and Ujratul Misl is a law that says anything a woman has done or suffered, or anything nice she has done in a marriage, and she says she wouldn't have done it if she was not in a marriage, she's now gonna be compensated for it with money. We used to have this law, and it was implemented 23 years ago by Islamic feminists, but one could only ask for it upon divorce. Islamic feminists made it available for women at any time. She can say that, okay, I'm washing dishes, give me this amount of money. The place I'm living is cold, but I wanted to live in that city, and if I'm just living here because of my marriage, so give me some more money, and stuff like that. And you talked about balance. Let me give you an example of what Islamic feminism is doing. One of the very interesting things that the West wanted to talk about was that women's worth in Islam is literally half of men.
Yeah.
How do we know that? Because women's blood money is half of men, isn't it?
Yeah.
It means that, well, if I die, the insurance company has to give my family twice the money that the insurance company would give if my sister died, right?
Yes.
So women's worth is half of men. But the fact of the matter is, when this law in Islamic philosophy came along, there was no insurance. And the only time it happened was when somebody was killed by another person, and the family of the victim was to be compensated with the blood money. Now, this law was there to protect women, because husbands who were killed, you know, if somebody would be given twice the money that a husband who lost his wife.
Yes, because he's the earner. He's bringing in the money in those days.
Oh yeah, that was the reality. It was there to take women.
Yeah.
But something else happened. Insurance companies came along, and blood money was to be given in case of injury. And in this case, if you were injured, the money was being paid to you, and it was not being paid to someone else. So if a husband was, injured, they would give him the money. And they said, well, we should have equality here. You know what has happened in Iran? Right now, if the injury that you receive does not result in death, the blood money is the same between men and women. And those are the cases that the blood money is being paid to the person, right? But if it results in death, the blood money of men is still twice. Because, you know why? Because it's now being paid to women.
Yeah.
This is the kind of equality we have. So
what happens if the woman dies? The blood money goes to who?
Very interesting question. It of course goes to the next of kin, and you'd think it would be the husband, but you know what? Yeah. The law of Mehriya remains outstanding even after death. So, the amount of money that is supposedly being given to the survivor, also the amount of Mehriya could be deducted from it and be given to the woman's family.
And he gets nothing.
And he might get nothing yet. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
We were talking about the specific issue of, aside from the honor killing thing, we were talking about how the issue of domestic violence is handled in Iran. And I know Erin had been curious what resources are available to women and what resources are available to men there. And
good question, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yeah, there are no shelters for women or men here. But what happens in case of a domestic violence in intimate partners? For children, I don't know what's going to happen. Nothing. No. For children, we do have institutions. Actually, we do have institutions that, and they teach children at the age of 7, right in the first grade, that if anything goes wrong in the house, you dial this number, you don't even have to talk. So for children, there is support like that. But for intimate partner violence, what happens is that if there is violence in a household, what the woman can do is very different from what the man can do. And because what the man can do is nothing. What the woman can do is that, she can leave the house and she can do 2 things. If she goes to the forensic center and the medical expert that is going to issue the letter is mandatory a woman and a woman only. Men are not allowed to examine her. So a woman issues the letter, and the court not only can jail the husband, but also she gets not only the right to divorce, but she also has the right to accumulate all of the mehriya at once. Aside from that, this can be done with 2 witnesses. So if a woman goes into the court and says, these 2 people have witnessed that I have had some injuries because he hit me. Again, all of this can happen. But for men, if he can go to the forensic center, he can get support too, like this. And she can be fined. But I don't think the witness is going to work for the man. Because it's just, because, if a man says she hit me and he brings 2 witnesses, she can bring 2 witnesses and says, he hit me. And in these cases that both have hit each other, mostly the husband is found at fault. I'm going to give you a milder example as to understand why. When it comes to verbal insult, if you call your wife a whore, you can be lashed 70 times. But if you call your husband whatever, you're not going to receive any sort of punishment. So you can just expect that, and I've seen that Islamic courts favor women in those manner. In that manner.
And there's no evidence required, so she can just make an allegation, like they can
here. I don't know where it is, but there is somewhere on YouTube a video of courts in Iran, and it's a documentary. She just goes into the court and tells the judge, he called me a whore, and the judge tells her, okay, bring me 2 witnesses and I will have him lashed.
Gosh, well, yeah, I wouldn't want to be a man in Iran. How about you, Dean? And how about you, James? I mean, it sounds very dangerous.
Well, it does. Let's see. If I get married and it's an unhappy marriage, I guess the theory is I can divorce her anytime I want, but I probably owe her more money than I can make.
Yeah.
And I can go to jail if I don't make enough money. And if she's abusive, I'm pretty much out of luck. That sounds really nice.
You'd think that you're able to divorce her, but when you're gonna, and you hold your head high because all those feminists on the TV said that, men have unlimited right to divorce, and many Iranian men are actually deceived until they walk into the court. And they tell you, okay, yes, you do have the right to divorce. Just pay her ujratul misl and her mehriye and her nafaqeh for all these years. Now, can you divorce her right now?
So I can divorce her at will. I just have to owe her more money than I make, most likely.
Oh, yeah.
You can't get the
more
divorce
money than you have ever made.
Yeah, but
more money than you have ever made.
Can you still get? Okay, just clear this up. Can you still get divorced and pay her later, or do you have to pay everything and then you can get the divorce?
Okay, what has happened is that prior to 3 years ago, what would happen is that if you couldn't pay, you would go to prison.
Rather than get a divorce.
I'm sorry?
So this is when she's asking for a divorce, or you're asking for a divorce?
No. If she's asking for a divorce, and she doesn't even have to ask for a divorce, because she can ask for the mehriye even during marriage.
Okay.
She even can say, I'm not. Yeah, she can say, I don't want a divorce, I just want my mehriye. And, well, if you couldn't pay, you would go to jail. And anything you owned would be confiscated by the court, by the way. The moment she goes to the court and says that I want my mehriye, all your bank accounts rose. And, well, yeah, anything you owned would be confiscated. 3 years ago, they changed the law. And right now, if you pay 110 gold coins, they will have you pay the rest of it monthly.
Okay. Still horrific. No wonder no men want to get married in Iran. It's a license to blackmail for the rest of his life.
Oh yes, it is. It is.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And are you allowed to speak freely about these things, or is it still considered a very secretive business?
Mehriye?
No, just the whole business of divorce and men's roles in society in Iran. Can men, there are any groups of men getting together trying to change things?
Only from an Islamic perspective.
What does that mean?
It means that, if you say that all the Islamic laws are right, we just want some support for men, you might be able to do that. And nobody has ever done this, by the way.
So you're saying no, there isn't any, really?
Oh, there hasn't been any, yeah.
How long will men go on putting up with this situation, do you think?
Well, I think most Iranians are deceived, and they look at all these limitations that some of the women are complaining, but other women are saying should be there, and all these women. Let me tell you something. Every day we have some woman on TV who's saying that women should dress in this way and in that way, and shops should be banned from having any sort of sexy dress in them. Every day someone is on TV saying that. Let me tell you actually a funny story. The other night there was this woman on live TV, and she was one of those traditional women that had covered her everything, only her tip of the nose was out. And she said all women should have a job, and scientists have found that it is actually healthy for their body. And that person, the interviewer said, and why is that? She said, because there is this evil radiation coming out from males' eyes that would burn women's skin.
Oh dear, another mental health issue. Dear, dear, dear. And they let that go on and nobody questions it.
Oh, no, nobody questions it. And as I was saying, people look at these limitations and the only narrative there is that it's the patriarchy. And they think, okay, we should protect women. So there are two sorts of men. Men who have traditional women in their lives, and then they want to do whatever these women say, and they just want to be traditional. And then there are modern men who then want to protect modern women from all these limitations. So, well, men are busy protecting women right now, but I don't think it's going to last. Because men here have it real hard, because we're a country that have forced conscription of men for 2 years. And that is slavery. You're talking about oppression. This is oppression. You don't know what happens to men when they go into the military service. There is no such equivalence for women. Well, the military service is for 2 years. And when you go there, you will be trained for the military for 3 months. And after that, if you're lucky, some people get sent to do jobs in corners of country. If you're very lucky, you might be in the city. But the others, the majority of them, are sent to the borders where they have to be on watch and, they just get killed every day. They go to Kurdistan where there is unrest. They go to borders with Afghanistan, and many of them die every day. Mm-hmm. And the numbers of how many soldiers are killed is confidential. And the numbers of how many suicides occur while in the military service is confidential. Mm. That's what happens to you. And let me tell you something else. You're going to have to leave everything you had in your life for 2 years. You were living in that city, forget about it. You wanted to start a business, forget about it. Just go to the military service for 2 years and serve for the country. And, well, it's just for men only. You can't ignore this for too long. And I think the way people have been deceived about, the divorce laws, because they have been deceived by people like Abadi and others. Now we have a rise in divorce rates, and there are too many divorces occurring in Iran. 150,000 divorces annually. And more families are waking up to the fact that men are getting slaughtered in the family courts. They don't know where this problem came from, but they do see it. They do see that their sons are depressed, that their sons are suicidal. They don't know why. But this narrative of, men oppressing women, it just can't last too long, I guess.
Can I ask you, Ali, with your writings, are these published regularly in the newspapers in Iran?
Never.
Never. So none of this information ever gets out?
No, never.
Well at least we have a... Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say we do have it on A Voice for Men, including A Voice for Men Farsi. So even if you can read the Farsi language, which people speak there, is FAS for Farsi, fas.avoiceformen.com. So Ali here is something of a pioneer in getting out information. You
certainly are, Ali. I mean, it is horrific to listen to in this day and age. But I think this is now, it's a universal problem because the balance of power between men and women has swung so wildly, and it is so bizarre, the whole concept of all men being responsible for women's behavior and women being these weak creatures that have no chance of making their own decisions, that it's unbalanced and it's actually destroyed the fabric of most Western civilization, and we have a real reckoning to come to. And it sounds to me as though you're helping to make your country wake up to some really, really cruel facts.
Well, I hope I can do that, especially that for many people, they wake up when it's too late, when they are, as you said, blackmailed for Mehr by an ex-wife who's now using the money to, have a house on her own and go on trips with her boyfriend, while the husband cannot leave the country while he has not paid all of Mehr. So He's paying it monthly. He cannot leave until he has paid all of it.
Well, it sounds to me as an awful lot of men just going to, a marriage to an Iranian woman is a life sentence.
Well, they don't know it, but 20,000 Iranian men went to prison just last year for Mehr. We don't know how many went there for Nafaqeh.
It's astounding. It seems to me like what's been needed for a long time. Feminism comes along and it challenges certain things that seem like they're wrong or outdated and need to change. But when you also don't look at the male experience, you wind up with something horribly lopsided or even worse in some ways than what used to be. I have to wonder when men and women are just going to talk to each other. Frankly, I think at some point women need to be talking to each other about this stuff because men are just watching and I don't know. I'm rambling now. What do you think, Erin?
No, I don't think you're rambling. I think this sense of outrage is because men are doers. If they're put in a position where they can't do anything, and this is what scares me about the suicide rates. I mean, as you know, in our countries, the suicide rates are sky high of men who are impotent because they're unable to control their own lives. They have no control over children or what happens to children or their children, and they have no control over what happens to their homes. They can be kicked out with one phone call, and it's even worse. Even before a man has any problem with his wife in Iran, she can hold him to ransom financially whenever she's in the mood. And it seems to me, I know, and
that she can do.
Yeah, and that isn't the basis for a good relationship ever. How could it be?
Exactly. But they're just brought up to think that it's the man's responsibility to just provide anything the wife asks, no matter how irrational that is.
But what bothers me is now you have increasing numbers of women going to universities in Iran, haven't you? But
yes,
you would think
64% of university.
That's amazing. But you would think along with that would go a strong sense of I am able to earn my own living, stand on my feet, and be equal to the man I want to spend my life with. But the trouble is, she has come from a background of being brainwashed into thinking that she is privileged, she is owed. So it doesn't matter what she gets at university, whether she can support herself or not. She has this marvelous crutch, which is the man in her life.
Oh yeah,
in your country.
And not just in marriage, even in normal friendships, it's the norm that the man is responsible for everything. And if you ask feminists why do women, I mean, there are many women who work in Iran, of course.
Yes, of course.
And, well, the United Nations says that only 12% of the jobs in Iran are dominated by women. We don't know if that's true, though. But, well, if you ask feminists, they would just tell you that, well, there is discrimination against women. What they don't tell you is that not only women have all these laws that restrict men to provide for them, there are also many laws that actually forces the state to provide for women who do not have a man in their life. For example, we have a law that says in case a husband dies, you're going to have to pay his wife an occupational salary for the rest of her life. Now, if you really think about it, and the occupational insurance is, mandatory for all jobs. If you think about it, it means that, well, the insurance company is getting a lot of money from your employer so as to pay that amount of money when you're dead to your wife. It means that basically you get robbed by the state when you're working to provide for your woman, and when you die, the state pays back that amount that accumulated from you to your wife. The same is true for daughters. They get the salary of a deceased father. There is no such law for sons. There is no such law for husbands. It's just for women and, their daughters. Mm. And there is free medical. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. There's free medical.
Free medical, insurance for women.
But not for men.
And not for men.
No, not for men.
And weren't you even telling me that women have a right to work, but if they earn an income, it's theirs, not their husband's?
Oh, no, it's theirs, and the husband is not entitled to a cent of it, never.
But she can still demand all of the money that he owes her.
Oh yeah, she can.
And,
yeah, of course.
And she also.
And normally they do. I'm not saying all women are like that, but yes, most women who work, their money is their money, and anything else should come from the husband's money.
And weren't you saying that also that women don't have? They have basically no requirement to work. If they want to, they can, but there's just no requirement that they do so. Somebody else must support them, whether they want to work or. They never have to work. It's always a choice. Someone will always be legally required to care for them, no matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't see how you can.
Yeah, I mean, when they're born, the father is responsible. If the father dies, the state gives them the salary, right? When they get married, the husband is responsible. If the husband dies, the state again is responsible. And, well, if you don't have a husband and a father, the state is responsible. So you're never in your life required to provide for yourself.
Oh dear, the oppression of women. Goodness me. I suppose, and also the other branch to all this is we're now seeing global feminism as a reality. I mean, it's been coming for years with the UN slowly being feminized to where everything it does is on behalf of women and girls. And of course, the ironic truth of the matter is that in this effort to create this new world of just women and children and men being disenfranchised, men on the whole are not even aware of what's happening to them until it's going to be far too late. And all I can say is thank God for you, because without you, there'll be nobody standing there. It must be quite lonely being this lone voice. I hope you have some support from other men. Do you?
I'm honored to hear compliments from the legendary Erin Pizzey. And yes, it's a bit difficult to be the only voice, but I do receive emails from some other men who support what I'm doing.
Good.
And well, they basically say that's the only voice that is making sense.
Good.
In just years, they have been berated, and this is the first time they're hearing something that is actually remotely close to the reality.
That's marvelous. We've had an hour now, so I think we need to bring it to a close. But I want you to say to you, you have friends, you are listened to. This will go onto YouTube so other men can listen, and hopefully some sympathetic women in Iran. And I'm very, very glad to have been able to spend this time with you. And any time you need, please contact me.
Oh, thank you, Erin. That's very heartwarming to hear.
Good.
Especially from you. And yes, we're living in the miraculous age of internet. So
yes, thank you.
We are indeed,
yeah.
And that is.
I hope the message goes out there.
I think that is what is going to start turning the tide. Is in fact the internet. We're a global movement, and we're reaching more people all the time, men who care and women who care. All right, everybody, we will see you here again in 2 weeks. Next week, we'll be back with Tales from the Infrared, where we'll be talking about the usual nerd culture stuff. James, you want to take us home? You have been listening to When Did You Wake Up with Erin Pizzey. We would like to thank James Huff, Paul Elam, and the A Voice for Men community for their support of this show. If you like what you hear and would like to continue to hear more, donations can be made on the front page of A Voice for Men. That's www.avoiceformen.com. Our theme music is Space 1990B by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. That's INCOMPETECH.com. And is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution License 3.0. And will be noted in the show notes on YouTube. Thank you for listening.